On today's podcast, we're going to talk about a topic that sort of extends our topic from last week about taking away cell phones. But today we're going to talk about what is the problem with using stickers.
That's right. That's at the other end of the child rearing spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, we talked last week about taking our teenagers or
Punishment.
Teenagers' cell phone as a form of punishment. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the other end with young children. And the title of the article is "What's Wrong with Stickers?" Stickers being a metaphor for any type of reward or punishment that we want to use with children.
Yeah. So over the past couple of weeks, last week and this week, we're focusing on two of the key aspects of behaviorism. Parenting, what most parents use as their primary strategy for governing and managing their child.
Right.
That is rewards, so what we're talking about today,
Right.
and punishments, that's what we talked about last week.
Right.
So we're going to really highlight the issues with this idea of, you know, if you want kids to do certain things, if you want them to engage in particular behaviors, we need to reward them, and we start to blindly reward kids to the point where it actually creates more problems, and it's not really as effective as you would think it would be.
That's right. There is this, it's fair to say, there's an intuitive appeal about rewarding behavior. The idea that, well, if you want somebody to do something, offer them some reward. And that certainly, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, it does on the surface, but the problems you get into are that if you raise children to expect a reward for everything they do, then you're going to develop a child who has this bargaining attitude. Well, what is it worth to you? Or what is it worth to me? Or I'll do it if, or what do I get if I do that? And so there's an inherent danger in using rewards or overusing rewards.
Right.
Okay.
And I've even seen patients who, when the parent wants them to do something, even if it's something that is in the kid's best interest, something that the kid really needs to do,
or even wants to do,
the kid will say, "Well, you owe me. You owe me something because I did that."
That's right. And if you overuse rewards of any type, you're going to get into this bargaining attitude, and you're going to be raising a child who's always bargaining for what they're going to get from you. Probably something you want to avoid. Okay, so be very careful about how you're using rewards. Right.
So when we're thinking about rewards, just to put it a little bit more of a clear definition on it, I guess. In the column article, they talk about stickers, but what we're talking about is anything that you give a person with the idea that by giving it to them is going to increase the likelihood that they do something. So if the child eats broccoli and you give them a dessert, their favorite dessert afterwards, the idea is that dessert is going to entice them to want to eat broccoli again.
That's right.
So anything that you're giving a person to increase a behavior that you're wanting them to do more often would be considered a reward.
Right. So number one, don't create this bargaining attitude that leads a child to believe that they get something each time. Number two, some children are not going to buy this. They're simply not going to cooperate. It just doesn't mean that much to them. We have many parents who come in and they'll say, well, it doesn't matter whether I reward or punish, he doesn't care. And you have to be very sensitive to that. Some kids just don't care whether you give them a reward or not. They don't need it, and they don't appreciate it if you give it. And
that's why I wanted to throw in that definition right there, because if it doesn't matter to them, thinking about the broccoli and the dessert, if a kid can have ice cream all day long, and then they eat broccoli, or if you tell them, if you eat your broccoli, I'll give you some ice cream, they don't care. They're going to have broccoli. They're going to have ice cream all day long.
That's right.
So the power of a reward is only to the extent that the person wants it. If the kid doesn't care about it, it's not going to be very effective at all.
Right. And then the other assumption, number three, is that when you're talking about misbehavior, that misbehavior stems from a lack of motivation to be good. I mean, that's the assumption, that you're assuming that misbehavior is because the child doesn't have the motivation to be good. most kids have the motivation to be good. Right. They're kind of born with it. They want to be cooperative. Mm-hmm. We've said many times on the show, kids don't get up in the morning and calculate how they're going to misbehave that day. Right. You know, they just don't do it. They bump into rules and they bump into procedures, but there's no intent.
Right.
Okay? And so misbehavior is not just a lack of motivation to be good. So you don't need to motivate them to be good. Don't assume that they're being bad because they lack motivation to be good. It's probably some other reason. For example, maybe they're tired or hungry. Right. Okay, they're not intending to be bad, or they're overwhelmed with things. Kids frequently usually get overwhelmed with things, or they feel hopeless that there's no solution, or that the demands of the task exceed their ability, and so they would probably act out in some way. Right. So there could be many other explanations besides a lack of motivation for misbehavior.
Right. And again, the idea is that we want to increase motivation by offering a reward. And it doesn't always work. You know, I once gave an example to a patient because the parent was really perplexed that offering their kid this reward didn't make the kid behave in this particular way. Right. And I said, I challenged the parent with the question, what if they're not able to do it? And she said, well, I know he's able to do it. I said, well, how do you know he's able to do it if he's never done it? Well, I just know he can.
Right.
And I said, well, what would if I gave you $1 million?
Right.
Could you jump over this building? $1 million. What about 10 million? What about $100 million?
Right.
No, if you don't have the skill, it doesn't matter what the reward is.
Right.
And so we worked with this kid, and in fact, this kid didn't have the skill. He didn't know how to do it, at least not in the way that the dad wanted him to. And so we had to teach the skill. So as you said, it's not necessarily a motivation issue. Sometimes it's a skill-based issue. Sometimes it's an ability. It's a can't do, not a won't do.
Right. That's right. And two other things about misbehavior. I don't use the term misbehavior anymore. Children behave to get their needs met.
Right.
As a parent, you need to understand what need they're trying to meet. We talked about Ross Greene many times on the show. Kids behave to get their needs met. We call it misbehavior. To them, they're just behaving to get their needs met. Okay. The other thing is, in line with what you just said, do they have the ability? Frequently, we'll hear things like, "Well, she did it. She does it at school, so I know she can do it. I know she can." And frequently, teachers will say, "Well, he's done it before, so I know he can do it." No, that's not always the case. Right. They may do it in this context or at this time, but not at this time or in this context for a very different reason. Right. So just because you've seen them do the behavior doesn't mean they're going to do it consistently or in all places.
Right. And it's an issue that we have talked about here on the podcast before, and that is, when asked, does the person know the difference between right and wrong? Yeah. For example, we're asked to testify quite often. And when we testify for forensic cases, they said, well, did the defendants know the difference between right and wrong? Probably. Oh, well, then that means that he knew that what he was doing was wrong. Not necessarily. Not necessarily at the time.
Right.
Because many times we know the difference between right and wrong, but we still engage in the wrong behavior. Not because we want to be wrong or not because we want to be bad, but because at the time we didn't have the capacity to differentiate and change our behavior.
Right.
So our kids are the same way. When you're in a hurry to get somewhere, you're going to speed. Now you know that it's wrong to speed, but you speed because you're trying to get there to where you're going as quickly as possible.
Yeah, you know right from wrong.
You know right from wrong.
But under these circumstances, you chose this behavior.
Right. And not because you're doing it consciously, but because you're in a hurry. And then how many times have you looked down at the speedometer and said, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was going that fast. Right. You weren't doing it consciously. You're just in a hurry, and so you're going faster than you would expect. Right. Kids do the same thing. They are in a situation, something is happening, they are behaving, as you said, it's not necessarily misbehavior, they're just behaving, and they make bad choices. They make a decision that goes against what is otherwise expected in that setting. Parents and teachers refer to that as misbehavior, but a kid is just behaving. The kid is just doing what the kid does to have their needs met.
And if you can see it as just behavior, I mean, it's not misbehavior. If you see it as just behavior, it starts to clarify your thinking a little bit, makes it easier for you to make the right decision about how you should respond.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
And then number 4 is, if you're constantly rewarding, you're taking away the child's internal or what we call internal motivation or intrinsic motivation. We call it intrinsic. But we are all born with motivation. Right. We're all motivated. We're motivated to eat. We're motivated to sleep. And so we all have intrinsic motivation. And I mentioned in last week's podcast about the children in Zambia who got the iPads. There's this, how does this work? What can I do? And so there's this intrinsic motivation that people have to solve problems and to learn things and to do things. Right. And so you don't want to get in the way of that. Right. And if you're constantly rewarding externally, if I'm standing around passing out stickers for everything they do that's good, I'm denying my children the opportunity to develop their own reasons for doing it.
Right. And we want that internal or intrinsic motivation. We want that to develop because that is what is that personal or self-drive to accomplish other goals. You are not going to be able to provide an infinite number of rewards to get the kid to do everything you need them to do. Right. I mean, for goodness sakes, as soon as they leave the house for college or for work or to become an adult or whatever, as soon as they leave the house, your ability to reinforce and to influence their behavior dissipates. If they don't have developed within them an intrinsic motivation to make good choices or to do what it is that they need to do to survive, they're not going to.
That's right. When we talk to parents, they say, well, what do you want of your children? Well, I want them to learn how to do this, and I want them to do it for the right reason. Then you can't just reward everything that they do because you're denying them the opportunity to learn how to do it on their own. Right. Okay, so be careful about overusing these things because it'll rob your children of developing their own motivations, because that's what's going to sustain them is their motivation. Right. You can't always be there. So what are they going to do when you're not there handing out stickers?
Absolutely.
The last thing to remember, the unintended consequences, what we're talking about now are the unintended consequences of what seems like a reasonable approach of rewarding your children. The last one is very few families can keep up a sticker chart.
Right.
I can tell you, it is arduous and hard to do. It sounds great. It's like a New Year's resolution. I can do this.
And we think schools do it all the time. Teachers can do it with 20 students.
No, most families can't.
Most families can't.
You can't keep up. You can't keep track. You can't keep up. You forget about that, and the thing falls apart. So be very careful about setting it. And the more complicated your I've seen some sticker charts that
very complicated.
Whoa, there's no way that you could do it day in, day out.
Yeah.
People get sick, people get tired, people go on vacation. You can't sustain a complicated sticker chart. Okay, you shouldn't have to. First of all, you shouldn't have to have a complicated sticker chart. And we're going to talk about those in the second part of the podcast, is when rewards are useful. Okay, so we'll get into some of that in the second part. So when are they useful?
Yeah.
Remember in graduate school we learned, wasn't it called SMART?
Yeah.
What was measurable,
simple,
achievable,
measurable.
Simple? Was it simple?
I think so.
Yeah, we had an acronym that we learned in graduate school that if you're going to use rewards, you have to be smart about it, and it was something measurable, achievable, realistic, and tangible. Yeah, I think was the last one. Okay,
you surprised me with that question. I would have looked it up. I can't remember.
Right, and I think it was simple. It has to be simple. You have to keep if you're going to use them. You have to do simple procedures. First of all, it has to be logical. They have to be logical. Right. Okay, that's number one.
Well, just as we talked about last week with taking away the phone willy-nilly, it's not logical to take away the smartphone because they're being rude to you when the phone has nothing to do with it. It's not logical.
Yeah, it has to make sense to the child. Yeah. You know, if this happens, then we'll do this. Okay, there's this if-then, but it has to be a simple, logical, sensible that the kid gets it. Okay, if I do this, this is going to happen. Okay, and it's going to happen every time. Right. Okay, so first of all, it has to be logical. Second, rewards are useful for what we call getting over the hump. Right. Okay, so you have a child who's not doing something, not getting out of bed in the morning, or not keeping track of their shoes, or not turning in homework or something. So you have a very specific behavior that's bothering you. Yeah. she's being disrespectful.
Yeah.
Don't go there. Don't.
Right.
That's too general.
Right.
It's too vague. You want to isolate a very specific behavior. You're not brushing your teeth at night.
Right.
Okay. So to get over the hump, you might start by saying, okay, as soon as you brush your teeth, you'll get this,
right.
and then when you accumulate 5 of these,
Yeah.
you can turn them in for something you want. And,
Right.
and this is the list of things that,
Right.
that are possible wants that you can
Right.
satisfy. Again, very simple,
Right.
very direct.
Sometimes the hump is at the very beginning, as you were just saying,
Right.
and sometimes the hump comes in the middle. So think about your own workout regimen, for example. You may be very, very motivated initially
Right.
to start working out, and you hit the gym and you're doing it in like for 2 weeks. You are at the gym, 3 times a
Right.
week, and you're doing really, really well.
That's
And then you hit that wall, and you're like, "Oh, I don't want to go today."
Right.
That is when a reinforcer, a reward, is really beneficial. So you might tell yourself, "Well, you know what? If I go today, then I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to get myself this as a reward," because that's going to get you over that hump. It's not, you have some intrinsic motivation initially,
right.
but it just can't sustain, and so you have to have the reward to get you over that hump.
I'm laughing because I've started about 27 diets so far this year.
Thereabouts.
Right? And it's because it's easy to start one.
Yeah.
Okay. I talked to a guy one time. He said, "Oh hell, I've lost about 300 pounds in my life."
Yeah.
Because he goes on diets and gains weight, and goes on diets and gains weight. It's easy to start something. Last week we talked about New Year's resolutions, how easy it is to start a New Year's resolution. The hard part is sustaining it.
Right.
So what I'm going to have to do is say, okay, I'll start my diet and be very enthusiastic for 4 or 5 days, but I know by Friday I'm going to need some way to get
Right.
over the hump, because by Friday or at night,
Yeah.
when you have less inhibition, that's when you need a tangible reward. That's when I need something, and I have to build that into the system because I fall prey to that
Right.
myself. And so you're right, getting over the hump.
Yeah.
So it might be worth rewarding yourself in some way just to get over the hump, whether it's to get started or to sustain or to get to the finish line.
Right.
Okay. Another is to gain the cooperation of your child. Frequently, you're really battling over something, and you sit down and say, "Hey, we're really having a hard time here.
Right.
Okay, how do we resolve this?" And so it might be worth
Using a reward.
rewarding somebody just to get the thing going,
Right.
to get cooperation.
Yeah.
And then finally, the other thing you want to do is you want to avoid bribes.
Right. Yeah.
Some of this is just plain bribery.
Yeah.
Okay. If you do this, I'll give you this.
Yeah.
That's not behavior management. That's not applied behavior analysis.
Yeah.
So please avoid bribes,
Yeah.
because you're going to get into that bargaining attitude. If this is a bribe, they're going to know it's a bribe, and they're going to
use it.
They're going to use that again.
Yeah.
They're going to weaponize that one. So these aren't bribes. They're used very differently. So be careful when you use them.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what are some effective rewards?
Well,
SMART,
Right.
whatever SMART stands for.
Whatever that was. But they have to be relevant.
Right.
Whatever the reward is, it has to be relevant to whatever it is that you're trying to get the kid to do.
Right.
So once again, just as taking away the cell phone for being disrespectful isn't relevant, you want to make sure that your reward corresponds in some way with the behavior that you're wanting from them.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that SMART,
Yeah.
the acronym, SMART is specific.
Right.
It has to be something very specific.
Oh, that's right.
You can't say, well, it's disrespect or it's disobedience. No. It has to be very, very specific.
Right.
You have to be able to count it. You have to be able to see it. You have to be able to agree on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you don't want to do is say, well, no, I wasn't being disrespectful. Oh, yeah, you were being. That's an argument you don't want to have. No, you have not brushed your teeth.
Right.
Okay. No, you have not cleaned your plate.
Right.
No, you have not found your shoes. So it has to be specific.
Right.
You have to be able to see it and count it. We say measurable, achievable,
Right.
relevant. It has to be meaningful to the child.
Timely.
And timely, right?
Yes. So it needs to be immediate. You don't want to. This is the issue that I have with rewards and punishments for at home for behaviors at school.
Right.
If a kid does something really, really good at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then the parent is trying to reward them at 6 p.m.
Right.
It's not. There's not a connection there. And that may sound like, oh, well, but it's not too bad to give them a reward at 6 o'clock for something they did well at 9 o'clock. That's not so bad. But think about the reverse.
Right.
If they did something bad at 9 o'clock in the morning, punishing them at 6 o'clock makes no difference at all.
Right. No.
And so it's the same both ways,
Right.
whether it's a reward or a punishment. You want the reward or punishment to be immediate. As soon as the behavior occurs, you want the
That's right.
reward or punishment.
T stands for timely.
Right.
It has to be. They have to be close in time. You did it. Here's the reward. You can't say, well, we'll do something on Saturday.
Right.
It's too far off. Okay, it has to be immediate, and then they make the connection between this and getting some type of reward. Second, we would advise that you try to use non-tangible rewards.
Right.
Okay, legitimate compliments. That sort of, man, you did a great job, or I really appreciate that you did that. That too is a reward, but it's a non-tangible reward, so you don't have to keep track of all this stuff.
Right. Yeah, I used to work with a group, and the idea, they had drawers full of pencils, and they would give kids pencils for coming in and doing testing and cooperating and things like that. I never wanted to do that. I never wanted a drawer full. Actually, I still have a drawer full of pencils that
Is that what those are for?
Yeah.
I wondered about that.
They're just
they're
in the
cute.
other room.
They're all colorful.
Yeah. They're nice, but I never used them because what I found was that a high five and saying, "Man, you did a great job," that means just as much, if not more, to most kids than giving them a pencil or any other tangible reward. So
Absolutely.
just praise them, appreciate them.
Right. The other thing is use surprise rewards or unexpected rewards.
Right.
I do that with my kids all the time. I don't reward my kids for everything they do, but every once in a while I'll say, man, that was then it means something. Okay.
Yeah.
They weren't expecting it. It wasn't part of the program, but it came out of nowhere. To them, it came out of nowhere. But I'm thinking all the time, well, it's about time to issue another reward just to keep this thing going. So go ahead and use unexpected consequences. Get up on a Saturday morning. So you guys have been so good. We're going to have pie for dinner tonight or something. Just some crazy thing. They'll never forget that.
Right.
Dad, remember that time we had pie for dinner? They're not going to forget that. They'll be talking about that long into adulthood. Unexpected, unplanned, a little bit offbeat, has a much more powerful effect than giving a sticker each time or a coin or a toy.
Right. Okay? Absolutely.
And then finally, use them sparingly. Don't use them sparingly.
Yeah.
You don't want to get your kids on a steady diet of rewards because they're going to expect it, and then you're going to get into that bargaining attitude, and that's what you want to avoid.
Okay? Either that, or then it just loses its effectiveness, and the kid doesn't care.
And so the next question, final question that comes up is parents say, well, if I don't do that, what else is there?
Yeah.
How do I get my kids to do what I want them to do? Yeah. Okay. So again, we've already talked about descriptive praise. Man, I really like the way you did that. My daughter played a tennis match yesterday, and she wanted to know very specifically what was I impressed with? So she said, I want to know 7 things I did. I want to know 7 things. Right. So we talked about what she did well. That was descriptive praise.
Right.
There were some things that she didn't do well. We didn't talk about those.
Right.
Okay. Genuine appreciation.
Yeah.
Oh man, honey, I really appreciate that you walked the dog or did the dishes or something. Again, occasional, but appreciative, genuine appreciation, powerful reinforcer. So you can
just
use
communicating
that.
with your kid.
You can also give a choice, give the child a choice. When do you want to do it now, or do you want to do it later? Do you want to clean your room this morning, or do you want to wait until this afternoon? It's up to you. And then again, you give your child some agency. You give your child some control, and that's what they want.
Right.
They want to be part of the process. We don't want to be doing things to our children. We want to be doing things with our children. So give them some decision making. And we mentioned applied behavior analysis a few minutes ago. One of the things in applied behavior analysis that we try to get people to switch is, instead of thinking in terms of waiting for a behavior to occur and then providing a consequence, engineer success before the behavior occurs. Okay, that to me is one of the easiest solutions that any parent, any family can institute, is engineer success. I don't know how many times you've said on this program, wait till your child has a nap before you go to the grocery
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
Okay? A tired child is a cranky child. Okay, that's not the time to go to the grocery store.
Right.
It's not the time when you're in a hurry.
Yeah.
Okay, parents say, "Oh, mornings are horrible." Well, get up a half hour earlier.
Yeah.
Give yourself enough time
Yeah.
to engineer a quiet, calm morning. Okay, set your clock 15 minutes earlier, a half hour earlier, an hour earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so that everybody has time to move at their own pace. If you get done early, you can do some other things, but you've given yourself enough time.
Yeah.
So engineer success. Don't wait for bad behavior to occur and then punish it. That's not very. I almost said that's kind of.
Yeah.
That's not an effective way to do
it.
it.
Thing to do.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, model cooperation. If you want cooperation, you should model cooperation.
Absolutely.
Again, don't stand over them, over your children, and demand that they do something. Model what you want to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The kids are going to learn more from what they see you doing than they will from what you tell them to do.
Kids are going to do what they see, not what they're told.
Right.
Not what they hear. So
Absolutely. So
okay.
the article is in the show notes. The link to the article is in the show notes. So check that out. Read it and let us know if you have any thoughts, ideas, or anything, what's worked and not worked for you.
Right. And again, we've talked about these kinds of things many times on the program, but every once in a while it's good to review.
Absolutely.
And again, we're getting new subscribers who haven't seen some of this stuff. So if you have any questions, comments, additions, deletions, let us know.
Absolutely. So, all right, that is it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.